Hey everybody, we're back here at React Europe 2019 at Jared Palmer and here with Ankita Kulkarni, software engineer from Wrangle.io. How you doing? That was an awesome talk.
Oh, I'm doing really well. Yeah. The talk is very interesting. I really enjoy giving this talk.
Tell folks a little bit more in depth about what you were covering today.
Yeah, so my talk was all about accessibility 360. I was drawing comparisons between web and mobile, just because this is a single track conference and a lot of developers are web developers, some of them are mobile developers, or who knows, most of them are mobile developers. So I just wanted to compare web and mobile and sort of give an idea that accessibility is not a scary thing.
Right.
It's literally just like how we build features. It's literally like that feature. And some of the things that I did when I incorporate accessibility, or whenever I start working on a project or I join an existing project, what are some of the things that I do? And that's literally what my talk was about.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. It's basically like a human right? Like,
yeah.
It's pretty serious subject. And when you think about it, accessibility is not just the screen reader part of it, right? If you think about mobile is accessibility, right? You want to be able to access something from any device, and so it's an extension of that, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And how do you think about it?
I would also think about the same way. I feel like accessibility is not something that is. We think of accessibility okay, it is actually only for certain people,
right?
And it's not us,
right?
But the reality is, it is. At some point, it was already it was you, or at some point,
it's a friend, it's your mom, it's your
or
dad,
in future, it's going to be. It might be you as well.
I've increased my text size on a couple of
yeah, I've seen my mom do it as well. In fact, recently I started feeling I started getting vertigo and I started feeling dizzy.
Yeah.
Animations was a big thing. I was just really annoyed when even videos automatically start playing on apps.
You also talked about that in your talk. You talked about the Incredibles movie, Pokemon, certain films and stuff not properly warning.
Yeah, not properly warning, and then there are consequences to those things, and all we had to do is don't start a movie automatically, slow down animations if accessibility is enabled, and it's literally just a check, if it's on, just reduce the speed. And as developers, we all are capable of doing that. It's just that there's I would say there's lack of awareness, or even though we are aware, we don't know what the right thing to do is.
So let's talk about that, because React makes it so easy to be so productive and do a lot, right?
Yeah.
And because we don't have some sort of centralized, standard, accessible thing that we all use and share, you can just build your own version of it really quickly, and you can think it works, but be tricked into a false sense of correctness because it may not be accessible. So, and then there's the question, which is one of the powers and beauties of React, but also it's challenging for building accessible applications and such. So, what are some things people can do towards where can they learn?
I found that there are a few courses on egghead.io which are really helpful for accessibility. Also start with the docs, although docs could be somewhat scary just because there's a lot out there, and that's why talks like these really help users get more awareness in terms of where to look for, what to do. Also start an accessibility community of practice at your company as well, just so that you're not alone out there. At Wrangle, we have something like that. And we literally, I'm getting more active in that community as well, but there's already a community that existed, and a lot of developers are just sitting in one room and trying to figure out, okay, we got this, how do we do this, and so on.
Do you think it should be the job of the average developer at a company to know all of these things about accessibility? And I know that is a controversial statement, but should it be reserved to the specialists and then everyone uses the primitives that they build, or should it be this thing that everyone needs to know about?
I feel like it's both. I feel just how software design patterns exist, right?
Right.
So just we follow those patterns, but at the end of the day, we do what's good for us, right, in our apps itself. Similarly, I feel accessibility patterns, they are already partially established, and we need to, as a community, we need to establish them more. And then as developers, we need to be aware of those practices, right?
Right.
For example, if developers don't know what a singleton is, for example, that's something that I feel a lot of developers should be already aware of, and they're already aware of already. So.
But you're asking, to push back, play devil's advocate. You're asking the engineer to now keep track of CSS and HTML and JavaScript and the framework they're working on, and then also make sure it's accessible. It's like a lot of stuff to deal with, right? And by the way, you may think you've just built a cool select input, but you probably haven't handled all the correct accessibility cases. It's a whole different layer, right?
Yeah.
And looking through all the keyboards, and it just like, it could take a component that you think is working and make it 3 to 5 to 6 or 7x. It may like completely change implementation.
For sure,
I guess my point is that like, is that something that that should be reserved to special teams at companies to just concentrate on, or do you think it should be like completely everybody?
I feel like there should be definitely some specialist teams in the company that can give more knowledge in terms of how we can do a certain thing, how behavior can be established. But if you think about it, like if on a web form or be it a web or a mobile app, what are the different components that we have? Buttons, checkboxes, radio boxes, text. There are different keyboard navigations and so on. These are all common elements.
Yeah.
The only, I would say, the fancy parts, that one of the fancy things we would do is like animations and so on, where we would get like out of the board, and people might not realize what exactly needs to be applied. But to get to your point, I feel like there should be definitely a specialist in the company. But at the same time, I still feel like every developer should be aware of these things. It's like literally a few props.
Yeah, no,
right?
totally.
So it's like, as you know, that as when we're starting to write HTML, we need to follow the semantics. That's like one of the base principles, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think it's that hard. It's just that how much the impact of it is so big that we start thinking that it's actually really hard. But when I started diving into it, I felt like it is literally just like any other feature. Just like how we get, as developers, we get really excited to like play with this cool tool or whatever. In fact, in a very recent project, like we started also making the form elements pretty accessible too.
How did you do that? Just added certain,
there's
a spec from WCAG, right? That's the accessibility guidelines. You just follow that.
Yeah, I'm just gonna drink some water. Sorry.
All good.
Yeah. Yep, so what we did was we built a design system, and we decided that, okay, this input text component is something that's going to be used throughout the app, just because we had the sign-up process, which were like 10 to 12 step process. We started adding all the accessibility props to that component. So wherever we use input text component itself, that input text component, that specific form element was accessible. And that really helped.
So design systems are a really great way that you can abstract away some of this complexity, obviously, right? Are there any design systems that you modeled yours or the system at Wrangle.io, or like it's in philosophy or
Actually, we are starting to do that right now. We had a very recent meeting where we decided that this is something that we want to start doing internally. As just like Facebook is doing in Jonathan's talk that we saw today, that Facebook started blocking off elements just to let developers know that, hey, these elements are not accessible. What we want to start doing is all these common components. We want to create probably potentially a library at some point, just so that we can push this practice further. But at the same time, it's like this is something that we want to start internally first, see how it works with different clients. And as we get more success rate, we can like start pushing it and making it open source.
What are some tools that you're going to use during that process? Are you thinking that at just a component level, or are you thinking that also as a tooling perspective? Like there's the ESLint plugin for A1Y, the thing that Brandon showed off today with Scheduler, using that to like run basically during development. It seemed like it was doing some messaging there too.
So
what's your approach?
At this point, we're thinking at a component level. We'll start with that. We'll start small and start slow. There are a lot of different components that we're already using. React, for example, is already out there. Then we also want to like
Did you say React?
Yeah, React.
Yeah,
React. Sorry.
So I don't know how to pronounce it, but yeah I know what you're talking about.
So like it's already out there. So that's a good start. When we can start referring these components and seeing how these different applications have these different patterns, then we can start building more of like a community of practice as a as a community altogether, and it's not like specific to the company then.
Got it. And how many people are working on this with you at the company?
I guess it totally depends. It's totally like voluntary itself, right? So like people, I would say maybe like 10 to 15 of us that we are working on it. And this is something pretty recent too. This is something that we want to grow. And the community of practice existed like a while ago. So we started establishing patterns that we can actually use with our clients and go from there. And this is where we triggered the idea that, hey, we can actually start building components and start adding to Storybook and then go from there.
So you use Storybook for your workflow.
Yeah.
How are you liking it?
Oh, I really enjoy it.
Yeah.
I feel like it really helps. It's a great way to like collaborate with designers, ad developers, and also the product owner. If the product owner is on the client side, and it really helps itself just because it gives them a visibility on like not just like what we are working internally, right? So we're just like, yeah, like we're working on this thing and it's not ready. They don't see any progress for 3 days, but actually we have built like 3 different components, and they can see it in the way of Storybook because they have the link to that. They're like, oh, this developer actually was not slacking around, but actually
There's been
working.
progress.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really interesting. You're using it for, I run a consultancy, and so it's very interesting to hear you say that like Storybook is your portal to your clients. That's super interesting.
For sure, like this, it really helps in communication because when you're working with clients, especially, like you need to make sure that you are communicating really well to them. Like you're making sure that all your progress and everything, because that's it gets delivered to them, and it's just like that's a great way of like building trust with them, right? So because as a consulting firm, I feel like Wrangle is where it is right now just because of that, just because of building that trust and everything.
Very cool. Well, thanks so much for joining us. This was really, really, really fun. How can people follow you?
I would say Twitter would be the best place. I have started writing blog posts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and there's one on accessibility that's coming up because I felt like I spoke to a lot of devs, designers, and not everyone gets the time to watch a talk, or not everyone. I cannot go as deep as I would like as well. So I feel like I want to do that through blog posts. So yeah, there's definitely a blog post coming out for what I spoke about, but more in depth as well.
Have you connected with Ryan Florence about like Reach UI? Have you seen it? Like played with it at all?
I did. In fact, I was investigating on it, but I don't know enough to like talk about it itself. But
You should collaborate.
Yeah, for sure. Like I'm looking for more people to collaborate, and I felt like the reason why I even got interested in doing more conference talk is because accessibility was one of the things I was like, why is everyone thinking it's so difficult? Like it's not that difficult. It's just people need to be more aware of it.
Yeah.
And as developers, we all are very smart. We can figure it out together. It's just we need to establish these different practices and patterns so we can follow. And the more documentation, the more blog posts there is, like it's going to make our life easier.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again. And what's your Twitter handle so folks can connect?
It's Kulkarni Ankita 9.
Very cool.
Yeah. I don't know why I added the number 9, but yeah.
The number 9. All right. Well, very cool. Well, thanks again for joining us, and definitely check out her talk on React Europe's YouTube. And again, I'm Jared Palmer, and we'll see you just in a little bit.